Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to CIL research seminar, publishing in high quality journals, challenges and opportunities. My name is Yoshiki Shinohara, the director of Center for Inclusive Leadership in Ritsumeikan Asia Pacific University, and I'm the moderator of this session. And this is a webinar. One of the benefits of the webinar is that you can join even though you can at anywhere, right? So I'm very happy to have this seminar. And especially this time, we invite a guest speaker from the United States. So our guest speaker is Professor Lynn M. Shore. So she is the executive director of the HL Edge Network at Colorado State University, and her work has appeared in elite scholarly journals such as Academy of Management Journal, Academy of Management Review, Journal of Applied Psychology, and so on. And of course, her research is highly cited in, and for example, you can see the more than 10,000 citation in Google Scholars about her publications. So she served as an associate editor of the Journal of Applied Psychology in 2003 to 2008, and is a fellow of the American Psychological Association and the Society for Industrial and Organizational Psychology. So she is one of the famous and popular scholar in the world, and it's honor for us to invite her as a guest speaker. And I'm very happy that we can share her knowledge about the publication of for high quality journals. So let's invite Professor Shore.
All right, let me share my PowerPoint.
Yeah.
And is this clear? You can see the PowerPoint?
Yes.
Okay, wonderful. It is such a pleasure to be with all of you today and to share with you some of what I've learned about publishing in high quality journals, some of the challenges and opportunities that are associated with that. And just for fun, I included a picture of my campus. You can see it on the left-hand side, the beautiful mountains right behind Colorado State University. So that's where I work every day. So why publish in high quality journals? There's a lot of conversation about getting involved and the opportunity to publish in those journals. And I think it's a lot of hard work. It takes a lot of effort and a lot of motivation, but there are some benefits to publishing in high quality journals.
Professor Shore, sorry, I think that can you switch the screen? I can only see the top page. Yes, now I can see the second page.
Okay.
Yeah,
sorry
thank you.
about that. Yeah, I realize that. So why publish in high quality journals, given how much work it is? First of all, there's a broader readership. If you publish in high quality journals, more people will read your work. And I think for most of us who spend so much time writing these articles, we really want people to read them. And so that is one true benefit. Another is the status and reputation. So when you publish in higher quality journals, from a scholarly perspective, it definitely improves your status. People think, oh, you do high quality work. They respect what you're doing, what you're studying, and it does help you to build your own reputation. it opens up a lot of new opportunities because, again, with broad readership, many more people are reading your work and getting excited about it. And they think about you for many opportunities. So, for example, if someone is editing a special issue on a topic and you're someone who really publishes in that topic, they may invite you very directly to do that. So, the more that you publish in the high quality journals, the more that opportunities come to you. And another benefit is it improves your research because when you submit your work to a high quality journal, you'll get high quality feedback. So I have to say for myself, when I was early in my career, just a new assistant professor, that a lot of editors and reviewers really taught me a lot of things. And so even if you get rejected, chances are you're going to learn a lot from the submission. The feedback is really fantastic. And finally, the fulfillment that comes from people in your field respecting your work. So, as I said before, publishing is an awful lot of work, and you can spend weeks and actually years. I'm going to share with you an example of my own working on a particular article, and the fulfillment that comes from people respecting your work is part of the benefit of publishing in high quality journals. But there are some challenges, and I want to share some of that with you. Most important, if you want to publish in high quality journals, you have to be working on new and interesting research. It used to be like 40 or 50 years ago, you could just replicate somebody else's study and publish it in a nice journal. That is just not true today. So you have to have some new and interesting ideas. And sometimes those ideas don't become popular. Sometimes they become very popular. But you have to really explore things that are new and different that would excite interest. So that's a challenge because sometimes you think, oh, this idea is so interesting. And then you write about it, you submit it to a journal, and maybe the response is not all that positive. So that is a challenge. Secondly, theory matters. And I think that the high quality journals expect you to have a solid theory as a basis for your publishing, for your articles. And what I found is that sometimes people use convenient theories, right? There's a theory they think, oh, this one fits well enough. The problem with that, I find, is if you want to keep publishing on a topic, you kind of get stuck with the first theory, and maybe it's not such a great theory. So I would say a challenge is finding the right theory and making sure it really applies to the topic at hand that you want to publish. Another challenge is publishing in high quality journals means you have to meet high scientific standards. And not everybody has training from their PhD program in the kind of standards that you need to meet in a high quality journal. And so here, I think it's important to, do various kinds of training programs, to go to conferences, or just, enroll in some of the really great training programs that are out there that can teach you about software, analyses, all kinds of things. So there really is a lot of information available to improve your expertise. And sometimes too, what I found, because I've been in the field a long time, there's new software, new standards, new analyses that I'm always having to learn. And sometimes you think to yourself, do I have time for this? Because it takes a lot of time to learn these things and to get it right. But it really is required if you want to publish in those high quality journals. Another challenge is to become an expert in the literature, both old and new. And here, what I would say is I've been in the field for a long time. So if I read a paper as a reviewer, and I review a lot of papers for journals, if I read a paper and the author is not aware of relevant literature, or if they miscite literature because they're not really an expert, that's something that really bothers me as a reviewer. It seems that they've taken a shallow approach to doing research. So I've always told my PhD students, learn the literature since the beginning of time. That's the phrase I use. And if you do that, you're going to discover that some of the ideas that people are talking about have been around for a long time. And so, and you may get a reviewer like me who's been in the field for a pretty long time who expects you to know that, but also you can really draw on some of that older literature, which can be really good. So become that expert so that people come to you and say, oh, I don't know much about inclusion. Tell me, what should I read, et cetera, et cetera. Another challenge is that you need to pay attention to who is leading the discussion in your top journals in your area. And what are they saying? Who are the kind of voices of your area? Who is leading the discussion? And you're going to find that there are certain people who really are experts on a particular topic. I'll just say inclusion because that's sort of the topic of the day. So you need to know, who are the experts? What are they saying? How can I make sure that I read their work carefully and that I don't misspeak? So occasionally when I review a paper, I discovered that the author misrepresents my work. And so I don't get upset or anything, but it says to me that they probably need to read more carefully and make sure that they can really stand behind what they're saying. So make sure you pay attention to who's leading the discussion and what they have to say. The next one is the one that can be the hardest for the high quality journals. Get ready for criticism and challenge by others. I remember when I first started publishing, how hard that was. It's just, you're not very confident at first, oftentimes anyway, and then you get criticism after criticism, right? And so what I would say is be ready for that, but understand that every single person, even though I've been publishing a long time, I get plenty of criticism. I don't automatically get my papers accepted. I get criticized and challenged. That's part of engaging with high quality journals. The next challenge is finding the right journal. I think sometimes there's pressure in universities to only publish in a few journals. And if you don't publish in one of those few journals, maybe you don't even get tenure or promotion. But sometimes the ideas, the approach that you're taking to doing research, it really doesn't fit with a particular top journal that you think you'd like to publish in. So it's very important that you look at the journals that you're considering submitting your work to and make sure that your work, both the ideas, the methodology, and it can be things like a lot of top journals now expect you to have like 3 studies to support your ideas, right? And they want to see multi-methods. So a survey study, an experimental study, a qualitative study. So it's important to become familiar with the journals and see all the requirements that seem to, make for success with that journal. And remember that criticism is common and praise is rare. And part of that is the way that we're all taught to review papers, that you're looking for things that need improvement. But I remember probably about 20 years ago, there was a shift in editorial boards. Like when I was associate editor at JAP, the senior editor, Shelley Zedek, when he met with me and the other associate editors, said, make sure you don't just criticize, because people really need to understand when they get a review what is good, what you like about their paper. And it could be something as simple as you have an interesting idea, but your data doesn't really support that idea very well. That would just be an example. But remember that criticism is common, praise is rare, and this is the experience that every single author has. So that's a challenge. How about opportunities? What kind of opportunities do you get from publishing in high quality journals? First of all, you join a community of scholars who have common interests. And for me personally, I really enjoy the conversations around research. So just the other day, a colleague of mine called and, we talked for a long time about a research idea, and it was so much fun. And I think that your ideas get better. What can I say? Joining a group of scholars with common interests is something that inspires your research. It makes for lifelong friends. There's just many, many benefits. So once you start publishing in high quality journals, you're going to find that there's many other people who are interested in talking with you and maybe collaborating. Another opportunity is you have an impact on scholarship and practice. So sometimes people look at publishing as a means to an end, like, oh, I need to publish so I can get tenured or promoted or a raise. But mostly, if you keep doing research and you keep publishing, most of us who do that for a long time really want to impact scholars and we want to impact practice. And it's truly an opportunity to do that because you have more people reading your work. And so this is really a big benefit of those high quality journals. If you publish in a journal that not many people in your field read, chances are you're not going to have the same opportunity for impact. Lifelong learning. This, for me, has been one of the true pleasures of being involved in high quality research with a community of scholars. You just learn so much. There's some really bright people who are just filled with knowledge and skills and ideas. And most of them I found are incredibly nice as well. I mean, it's just really a joy to learn from such smart people. Another opportunity is to find your voice and your audience. Who is your audience? Who do you want to read your work? And what do you want to say to your audience? I think this is really important because a lot of times working on articles is very solitary. You spend most of your time working on it alone. Sometimes, you talk with your co-authors and so on, but I can't even count the number of hours that I've spent just sitting at my desk, writing a paper, rewriting a paper, rewriting a paper, so many times. And knowing your audience really helps you write the paper in a way that's appealing to that audience. The part about finding your voice is, part of that is knowing how you like to present your ideas. That's your voice. And what you find, of course, is everybody has different writing styles, and you have to find your own. Another opportunity is keeping up with your field. The more that you engage with high quality journals, the more you have to keep up with your field. You have to be widely read. And I find every time I read articles, I think to myself, wow, that is so interesting. It gets you thinking. And it also makes you realize how the field is evolving. Another opportunity is to become active in your profession. And so not only do you get to present your work, publish your work, but oftentimes doors open for other kinds of professional opportunities, which is a great thing. It makes for a very interesting career. You get to enhance your university's reputation through your own research. People say, oh, where's this university? Who's in the department? What else are they doing? So it's really great for the university's reputation. You're more likely to get grants. People are looking for success before they give you more money. And finally, it helps your community, businesses, university, region, country, students, colleagues. And this is part of why I suggest that you think about who do you want to have impact on, right? So if you do research on inclusion, then you're thinking, and I don't want to put words in your mind, but you might be thinking, Well, it's good for our local businesses. It's good for our students to learn about it and develop an understanding and skills. And it's good for this country as we compete with other countries. So you have to think about that. But really, the kind of work that we do oftentimes has a big impact on your community. And that's really a great opportunity. All right, let's move on to mistakes. And I've sort of implied some of these before. So they're not tragedies, but they're just things to consider. Knowing your audience. So depending on who you want to reach, you have to ask yourself, who's going to read my research and how can I write my research and conduct my research in a way that my audience finds it welcoming, finds that they want to read it. And this is an important thing. Now, logic. Logic is very important in writing articles. And I remember when I was a graduate student and I first started writing articles, my faculty would say, Lynn, you have such interesting ideas, but your logic is unclear. I don't understand the point you're trying to make. And then I took a seminar, I think it was my second year as a doctoral student, and the faculty who taught it basically had us rewrite a paper that was already written in a journal and go through the logic of it. And it's like the light bulbs came on at that point. But it really is important to understand what kind of logic you're providing for your readers. So I think of it like a roadmap. You start out the first page or two describing what you're going to do, and then you go into detail. And then at the end of the paper, you kind of go back up and again provide the major contributions. So you start out broad, but it's like a roadmap. Like if you were going to go on a trip, you would like to know, what highways do I use? When do I take a right turn or a left turn? When do I need to stop? It's the same kind of thing. Logic is really important. And if you're able to provide good logic, you're going to get a much more positive response to your research. Another common mistake, developing skills in critiquing your own work. This is hard. I remember so many times as an assistant professor writing a paper and thinking, I worked on the paper and I felt really good. And then the next day I would go back to what I'd been working on and I'd think, wow, this isn't so good. And so as you develop your skills in critiquing your own work, that's extremely helpful. Now, you can also ask people to read your papers for a friendly review. And what I mean by friendly is they're going to try to help you improve your research so you can succeed when you submit your article for publication. So when I say friendly, I don't mean positive necessarily, but they're going to point out for you, here's some of the things you really need to work on. And it's best to do that before you ever submit your paper. And if you know someone who's more likely to critique honestly, that's the person to go to because they're really going to help you succeed. Follow the journal instructions and formatting. That's another one. My co-author Beth Chung and I recently submitted a paper to a journal, and before she submitted it, she said, oh, the journal requires this number of pages. And she said, we only have 2 pages more. It's probably not a big deal, right? Well, they sent it right back. They said, we're not going to review it until you make the paper shorter. So, getting familiar with the journal instructions, formatting is really important. And it'll save you time in the review. And the last mistake that people sometimes make is not understanding what kinds of papers really are published in a particular journal. And this is where reading the journal, reading the instructions, and if you really have doubts, sometimes it's worth reaching out to the editor. So for example, you have a brand new topic, you're not sure it really fits the goals of the journal, you could reach out to the editor and say, is this something you'd be interested in? Now, I want to share with you an experience that I've recently had in terms of publication challenges. I don't want anyone in the audience to think that it's easy to publish, because it really isn't. And there's just a lot of challenges. So this paper here, Work Group Inclusion, with my co-authors, we published it in Group and Organization Management in 2020. And we recently received the 2020 Best Quantitative Paper Award from the journal, which was presented at the Academy of Management. So this was really a big honor, and we're very pleased to get the award. But let me tell you how long it took us and what we went through to get this paper published. So some of you may be familiar with our early work on work group inclusion, but my colleagues and I started working on this topic in 2010. And we were able to publish a conceptual paper in Journal of Management in 2011. And so we had a lot of success with this conceptual paper. And so we decided that we were going to develop measures of work group inclusion. So we started designing items and collecting data to measure work group inclusion. And we went through a lot of iterations. My colleagues and I recently were looking at all the data collection we did. I think it was 6 or 7 data collections as we sought to refine the measure and make a good measure. So finally, when we submitted our article, we first sent it to the Journal of Applied Psychology. We were hoping there would be an interest. We got a rejection. They said they were no longer accepting articles that focused on validation of measures. So this wasn't in any documentation or anything. It's just, it was the editor's preference. And so he sent it back to us and said, really, we don't want these kind of papers anymore. So, we submitted it. We waited for our review. We got our review with the rejection, and it came back to us. The second journal we sent it to was the Journal of Management. Here it was submitted. We got a revise and resubmit. And to satisfy the reviewers, we collected another sample to address their comments, rewrote the introduction, strengthened the logic, and we did everything we could to improve the paper. And by the way, we had 3 samples in this paper, so it was a lot of data we collected and used. The reviewers liked the article. One reviewer actually said, accept it. That was in their review, accept it, this is great. A second reviewer was extremely positive, had only a few things about the paper they didn't like that needed changed, and we could change everything. But the editor disliked one of our original items in the workgroup inclusion scale, and so rejected it, and which was really disappointing, but that's what happens in this review process. So the third journal we sent it to was Group and Organization Management. We got 2 revise and resubmits. We redid the analyses. We addressed more conceptual issues, and then it was accepted in 2019. It took us 8 years of effort from start to finish. Just so you know that publishing in these high quality journals is just a huge amount of work. So if that's your goal, just don't get discouraged. You might have some articles that you publish in maybe less competitive journals, but if you've got a really great idea and you believe that it can end up in a top journal, don't give up. Okay, so lessons learned. And there's a lot of lessons that you learn along the way. And I'd say to you that it's okay. We all go through a process of learning these lessons. And the more that you submit, the more you publish, the more lessons you learn. And of course, the field also changes. So keep that in mind. So first of all, it's often more difficult to publish new and different ideas. So if you have a really new idea, you may find that it gets rejected, even though you've done a fantastic job on your paper. And so the thing is that editors and reviewers are not always open to those new and different ideas. You would think that they would be. You're excited about it. It seems like the right time, but maybe there isn't as much excitement about it as you would hope. And in fact, I was going to share with you that one of my earliest areas of research, some of you may be familiar with, is on the employee-organization relationship. And when I first started submitting articles in this area, some of my reviewers were very negative. They said that they didn't believe that reciprocity was part of organizational commitment. And so, but I really believed in the idea, and I felt like it was time for that idea. And I published a lot in the area. But for some reviewers, it was a little ahead of the time. So remember that. Logic must be persuasive for every aspect of your study. Is just essential today. People look for that. Sticking with a good theory really helps. So remember that. Find your good theory and make sure that you use it. Take feedback seriously, and figure out how you can stick to your story and make the reviewers and editor happy. Sometimes that is not possible. Sometimes it is truly possible. My most cited paper, I think we have close to 6,000 citations, with Sandy Wayne and Bob Lydon. We published it in the Academy of Management Journal. When we first got that paper reviewed, and some of you may be familiar with this paper, we looked at the antecedents and outcomes of perceived organizational support and leader-member exchange. One of our reviewers said, I don't think you should include antecedents. I think you should just include outcomes. And Sandy and Bob and I talked about it, and we felt that the antecedent part of our model was the most exciting part. So what we realized is that our logic wasn't good. We weren't really providing enough good logic for the choice of those antecedents as we needed to. And when we addressed that, the reviewer no longer told us to get rid of the antecedents. So always look for, can you still tell the story you want to tell, and address the reviewer's comments. So don't change things that you think are right. It's your story to tell. And if you are passionate about your story, revising it, sometimes if you just want to satisfy reviewers, what you discover is oftentimes they're actually not satisfied because the story is no longer there. So be true to your story. And finally, be open to learning. It's just really important part of being an author. Just be open to learning. All right. Great ideas matter. That's, I think, very obvious from everything I've said. Consider timely and understudied issues. You know, what are the things in society we're struggling with right now? What are some of the things that we need to learn more about? And can you be the one who writes about it and gets people excited in studying it? Look for the right co-authors. Boy, oh boy, when you have a good relationship with your co-author, they're talented and smart, you can learn so much, and you can have an awful lot of fun. Sometimes you have to recognize too that maybe you don't have skills that are needed for what you want to accomplish, but your co-author does. And that can be a really good partnership. Okay, the next one can be a tough one. Manage your emotions. Feedback is impersonal. It's just the way it is. It's part of what we have to deal with as authors. And I remember when I was an assistant, one of my colleagues, I was teaching at Georgia State University, told me that when he got negative feedback, he would put the article away for 6 months. I thought, you don't have time. Don't, just if you need to be upset, just keep it in check. Don't let it get out of hand. Seek to become a perfectionist. The more that you seek to get your papers in really, really good shape, the more success you're going to have right away. So, you'll learn things as you go. And the last one, it's something that some authors do, is they'll challenge the decision of the editor. And I would say, just think carefully before you do that. Sometimes it makes sense. Maybe something unfair. One of the reviewers, I'll give you an example. When I was an editor at Journal of Applied Psychology, one of the authors who submitted something that I was editing wrote to me and said, I know who one of the reviewers is. They saw me present my paper at a conference, and they said the exact same thing. And of course, for reviewing purposes, if you've seen a paper before, Like if someone from your university submitted a paper, I had already read it or I heard you present it, you're supposed to recuse yourself and say, I'm not the person to review. So in that case, I got her new reviewers. Okay, here's a really important question. What inspires your creativity? Because really, publishing successfully involves creativity. Is it through discussing ideas with other people, reading the literature, talking to people who work, drawing on your own experience, qualitative studies, whatever it is? Remember that to do good research, you just need to draw on your own creativity, and we're all creative. Leader inclusion needs to be developed conceptually and empirically. So those of you who are studying this question about leader inclusion, what are the pressing questions? Where's business headed? How does inclusion fit? These are the kind of questions that I ask myself when I'm working on a topic. And finally, what kind of impact do you want to have with your work? Okay, all important questions. And the last thing I want to talk about is individual differences. Publishing in high quality journals is challenging. It's a big mountain to climb. So you'll want to ask yourself, am I someone who can persist in this challenge? Is it something that I would just find that I didn't want to do? So keeping that in mind, managing your emotions is critical to being successful. So remember the story I just told about my colleague who would put a paper away for 6 months. That colleague was not successful because you can't do that to be a successful academic. So when I was an untenured assistant, I had a 24-hour rule. That's what I called it, 24-hour rule. So when I'd get a rejection, I'd go home and talk to my husband and say things like, I'm a failure, my life is over, everything's terrible. And he would just nod his head and say, oh, I'm so sorry you feel that way. You know, he was empathetic. But then I'd go back, read the review very carefully, write out my reactions, write out my comments, maybe ask someone else to read it and give me feedback. So I allowed myself 24 hours to be miserable and to feel sorry for myself. And after that, it was just a task to be done. View every editorial decision as a learning opportunity. So to publish in high quality journals, you have to be humble in some ways. And so you have to ask yourself, am I humble? And finally, scholarly work involves a lot of time alone with little encouragement. Are you intrinsically motivated? Are you someone who's very self-motivated to do this kind of work? You don't mind sitting at home by yourself, writing papers, maybe, you know, something that takes 6 months or a year. So are you intrinsically motivated to do it? Do you derive personal satisfaction from doing it? Now, I discovered pretty early in my career that I like to write. I enjoy it. There's days that are much more miserable than others when I'm not writing very well, but really I'm very intrinsically motivated. And so that's just an important question to ask yourself. Is this right for you? So that's what I want to share with you. I guess I have a little quote. It's a final thought. It's a quote I like. Creativity is intelligence having fun. Albert Einstein. So that's it.
Yeah. So thank you so much, Shore. Thank you for sharing your wonderful experiences and many tips for writing journal articles. And I believe that not only me, but everybody has now been motivated to do research. And now next we go to the Q&A session, and we have already got some questions, but if you have any questions, please use the Q&A function, and you can write your own question to ask Professor Shore in both English or Japanese, okay? And now we have already 3 questions. So let's go. First question is about the slide 3. I think that you talk about the opportunities, right? So the first question is, where can we join the community? So you talk about the research community, right? So first question is, where can we join such kind of communities?
Yeah, I think that what I encourage people to do is reach out to individuals who are doing research in an area that they're doing research in. I get many emails from people that I've never met who say, I'm really interested in this article you wrote. Can we connect? And it might be that they connect by saying, do you have any recent articles or articles in press that I can have copies of? Or do you have measures? Or can I meet you at a conference? I'd love to chat about this paper. And what you find is that most scholars are actually very friendly, and they're really happy to connect with other scholars in their area.
Yeah, I totally agree. Yeah. I also, before COVID, I also joined some conferences in the US when I was a doctoral student, and I really upset whether I can talk many, how can I say, famous researchers and professors, but they are very friendly. Actually, they were very friendly.
Yeah, that's very common. So I always tell students, if you go to a conference or junior colleagues, introduce yourself and just say, I'm really interested in your research. And, you know, it's so nice to meet you. And so, yeah, we're a community.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. So second question is Lee, the weighted impact factors of journals are different. So how do I choose a suitable weighted journal for novice?
How do you choose a high impact journal?
Yeah, or especially how can he or she choose the appropriate weighted journal? So
yeah, I think that you know, there's certain journals that of course have high impact factors, which means that articles in the journal are cited more. And it doesn't mean it's necessarily the best journal for your article. So that's really an important decision. But I think that the first question I would ask is, are they publishing research on your topic or similar topics?
I see.
Because sometimes, like, I don't know, a couple of years ago before the pandemic, I gave a talk in Junior Faculty Consortium. I think it was the Gender and Diversity in the Academy of Management. And one of the members of the audience said, I'm doing research on gender identity, and I'm not sure the journal that I want to publish in will publish work like that. And I said, if they haven't yet, it doesn't mean that they won't be interested, but you can reach out to the editor, like I said before, and just say, are you interested in these kinds of articles? But oftentimes you'll see that certain journals, if you look at the editor's description of what they're looking for, oftentimes they'll be very specific. A new editor will write an article that's very specific about, I'm really interested in these topics.
I see. So it's better to check the, for example, editor's letters and what they are interested in now, right?
Yes, and also what they're publishing. Both are very important.
I see.
The work group inclusion paper that I just talked about, the editor, I didn't realize, they didn't say, I won't take validation papers. But that's what we discovered when we submitted it. So
I see. Oh, thank you. So the third question is, the use of the proper or right words and terms is one of the important things in writing the journal. So can you share tips on how to write and publish journals for students or writers who come from places where English is not as their first language?
Boy, that's a tough one. I think that if you can have someone check over your writing for grammar, you know, pay someone, first of all, to review and make sure that your grammar and your sentence structure is appropriate. Because otherwise, when you submit it to a journal, the reviewer may spend all their time trying to understand what you're writing instead of really trying to understand what your research is.
Yeah.
So paying someone to do the translation. You could also have, sometimes if you have someone who's a native English speaker or really has great English language skills to review and edit, do a friendly review and edit. So, you have to utilize this English language skills of either people or professionals who can fix your work for you. And oftentimes for students, their professor may know of someone who really does that excellent translation work.
I see. Thank you. So, okay, so next question is very simple. How do we define a high quality journal?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that there's so many journal lists. There's the Australian one, there's the Texas A&M one. I mean, there's all of these different journal lists. And I guess the question, there's really two questions that I would ask. One is, what does your university expect? And a lot of universities, I don't know if you use a particular journal list to decide on the quality of journals. That's become more and more common. Or just look at, for example, you can look at different universities. Let's say you have a university that you're thinking when you graduate, you'd like a job there. So look at where the faculty are publishing and what the expectations are. And often people will tell you, we want people who publish in these journals. There's a lot of journals, and high quality is defined by groups. And depending what group you're looking at, you could end up with a different assessment of what a quality journal is. So I can't give you a specific list or standard. The other thing, when I was department chair at Colorado State a few years back, the dean's office told us we had to develop a journal list. Now, I don't know if you have to do that in Japanese universities. We had to do that. And I will tell you that I don't think there's any other subject that causes more conflict among faculty than trying to develop a journal list. So what we did is we actually contacted a lot of different universities. Journals that, we have in the US, and I don't know if you have in Japan also, what we call peer universities and then aspirant universities. Peer universities are universities that we think are similar to us in terms of, the scholarship. And aspirant universities would be universities that we aspire to be like. So when we were doing the review of journal lists, we included both peer and aspirant universities to really justify why we chose certain target journals. We also looked at impact factors, but in business, of course, different disciplines have different impact factors, because in my department, for example, we have supply chain, which is a small field. And so their impact factors are much lower than in my area of organization. And so you really can't use the same standard across disciplines fairly to choose what a high quality journal is. I think I've answered your question, but if not, let me know.
But it's a very difficult to answer, but it's a very, you have already give some tips. For example, we cannot define the specific genres, right? So, and because it's depend on the field, and also everybody has different criteria, right?
That's right.
I think it's fine because you have already shown some criteria or how you can define or high quality or target genre.
That's right. That's right.
Thank you. So, and next question is that what would you consider is a shallow approach to reviewing literature?
I'm sorry, I didn't understand.
You mentioned in the slide it's a shallow approach.
Shallow approach. Okay.
Yeah. So, what do you consider about reviewing the literature?
Yeah, I think that reviewing the literature very completely important. So, for example, let's say you're studying something like organizational commitment. This is a topic that's been around since the 1950s.
Yeah, right.
And if you are not familiar with the older as well as the newer literature, you might discover that a reviewer finds a flaw in your logic and your thinking and your approach, or even views your review of the literature as kind of shallow. In other words, if you think of a deep review as one where the author clearly is an expert on that topic, you've really read the literature, you really understand it. And another signal, I think, of a shallow kind of paper is if you read the paper, and this has happened to me before, where people cite a study that I've written, but they cite it inappropriately. Like they say that I did something in that paper I didn't do. If you're having an expert review your paper and you miscite their work, that's a big problem.
Yeah.
You really, and you can tell sometimes people take citations directly out of somebody else's paper without having read the original. And oftentimes it comes through, it's clear that they did a shallow review instead of, when citing a paper, they actually read the paper and understood the paper.
I see. Got it. Thank you. Okay. Wow, a lot of questions are still there. So next question is, thank you, Professor Shore, for sharing your expertise and experience. During your decade-long journey until publication, were there moments of life where you lost your passion in publishing in high-quality journals, not the research person? How do you motivate yourself every day to enjoy the laborious, sometimes painful mountain climbing so that it does not become something I should do, but something that wakes me up in the morning to jump on? If we are not intrinsically motivated, does it mean that I am on a wrong career path?
Well, I don't want to give anybody advice about that. I have to say, early in my career, I got discouraged more because, you know, you learn from your mistakes, you learn from the feedback you get. And, you know, what I said to myself, and maybe this is something that for some of you would be helpful, is I said to myself, I will give everything that I have to give for 5 years. In the US system, you have to go through the tenure process after 5 years. So I said to myself, I will work very hard, I'll do the best I can. And if I fail at that point, maybe this is the wrong career for me. But until that point, I'm just going to give it my all, no matter how difficult it is. And, you know, I think what happens when you persist, you learn a lot of things along the way and you get better. That was the thing. If you take the feedback seriously and so on, your work just gets better and better. And if you see your own progress, for me, that was very satisfying. But early on, I really thought to myself, wow, maybe this is too hard. Maybe I'm not good enough. And I think that's a natural feeling for people to have. But, you know, on the other hand, I have loved my career. I love it. And there's times when I don't feel like writing a paper on a given day. But if you're working in an area that you think is important, you're working with co-authors that you really enjoy working with. I mean, there's a lot to enjoy about publishing, but I think early on it is very difficult. So some people find that they really don't care enough to try to publish in high quality journals. They don't have it. They don't have that feeling. So that's really a personal decision.
I see. Okay, thank you. So there's still 10 questions. So let's go next. For some universities, they give more credit to the first author and less credit to the second and other authors for a co-written paper. Do you have difficulties deciding who should be the first and so on with your co-authors, and how are they resolved, if yes?
Yeah, I try to have that conversation at the very beginning of working on a research project, because otherwise you can have conflicts that are difficult to resolve. So I like to have the conversation right away and say, okay, who's going to be the lead author? And usually I find with the co-authors that I've worked with that, like I was talking with a couple of people yesterday about a paper that we want to do together. And from our discussion, it's clear that I have the most time right now to organize the paper. And then another person has is second in terms of her time. And then the third person is going to be able to contribute the least. They're both very competent in everything, but we just had an honest discussion about it. Or it could be something as simple as you're the person who knows most about the topic, so you should take the lead. Or so it can be time, it can be expertise, but it's not a good idea to wait until you're well into the project to have the discussion.
I see. So it's better to decide first, right?
Yes. And it can be sometimes, you switch roles. Yeah. Because maybe someone started out as first author, but then they say, I really don't have time and I'm holding the project back. So hopefully you work with co-authors who also are a little humble and can just say, I think that you should be the first author or whatever.
I see. Yeah, it's a good advice. Thank you. So next question. Professor Shore, thank you so much for truly useful, informative, and encouraging presentation. Could you kindly elaborate how have you been dealing with the difficulty to publish new and different ideas? One of the points you mentioned in lesson learned slide.
That's a kind of a hard question to answer. Yeah. Because I think like when I first started publishing out of graduate school on the employee organization relationship, I did my dissertation in that area. And when I did all the reading for my dissertation, I thought that I had an idea about this idea of reciprocity and social exchange. And I really wanted to get that idea out there. So it was an idea that came to me from really reading the literature. And I would say that most often my good ideas come from reading literature. So for example, the other area, the inclusion area, I've done diversity research for a long time. And one of the things I noticed in the diversity literature is there was this theme of why can't we understand why diversity is sometimes beneficial, sometimes harmful, and sometimes has no effect at all? And there didn't seem to be clear answers to that question. And so that's when I started thinking about inclusion. And I thought to myself, people use the word inclusion. It seems like a good idea, but what does it mean? Yeah. As you can see, I get very curious about things. So I started reading the inclusion literature and I realized that there were good ideas there, but it was atheoretical. And I thought, there's an opportunity. So I felt like inclusion was an area that needed development, just like I thought about the employee organization relationship. And then I thought about, well, how can I contribute? And for me, I think I'm good with reviews. I'm good with seeing themes. Well, this is where you have to kind of identify for yourself what you're really good at. And I saw that there was a need, and I thought that I could fill that need to address the theoretical part of the literature.
I see.
So I think that it comes from recognizing what your talents are, but also reading very deeply and understanding where the field is going and what's missing, what needs to be solved. And some of that comes from reading the literature, but you can also look at what's happening in your society. What are some of the challenges that you see that you think you can address. You have an idea to help address this challenge.
Yeah.
And that's why I really emphasize creativity.
I see.
Look for the way in which you're creative and where you get good ideas and pursue those.
I see. It's a very interesting answer. Thank you.
Welcome.
Okay. Next question is that there are various indicators provided by, for example, Web of Science and Scopus, such as citation score, impact factor, etc. So what are the most important indicators do you think? Also, what should research institutions, universities do to support researchers to submit and get accepted to high quality journals?
Wow. Well, I do have an opinion. I think that there's a lot of ways to judge impact.
Yeah.
I don't think that there's one way.
I see.
So, Google Scholar,
yeah,
a lot more citations because they look more broadly than Web of Science. But in cases, you can sort of compare where you are relative to others in your field and some sense of, I guess, your reputation and your impact and that kind of thing. I think that one of the challenges is for those of us who really enjoy being creative, it doesn't every time yield a high impact, So I think that especially, it's a funny thing too. Some of the papers that I wrote early on that were really chapters have been more highly cited than some of my high impact journal articles. So I don't like the idea that we narrow too much how we define impact. That's just my own preference. I think that creativity needs to be encouraged and inspired rather than if you're worrying too much about the impact of your work, I think sometimes that can keep you from the creativity that you have. Yeah, because you're worried about pleasing somebody else instead of tapping into your own creativity.
I see.
It's just a thought for you. In terms of what universities can do.
Yes, especially,
and money.
Really?
Because I think time is really a big deal because to write high quality articles that are going to get accepted in high quality journals, you have to have time.
Yes.
So if you're teaching all the time and you don't have blocks of time to work on research,
yes,
you're not going to end up publishing in those high quality journals. It's just too competitive. And, for me personally, I find that when I'm working on a paper, I need to work on it a lot and I can't dabble, like work on this paper a little bit and that one a little bit, because the way my mind works, I need to be sort of engrossed in a particular paper. And even when I'm not working on it, I might still be thinking about it, but my mind is on it. So if I have to drop it for a month or two, then I have to go back and figure out where was I and what was I thinking about? And it's a big time waster. So I like to have regular blocks of time to focus on a particular project. I just find it more productive. So I think time is really, really important.
Yeah.
Having time. And in terms of resources, there's so many ways in which resources matter. So some universities, for example, have people who assist in data collection.
Yeah.
And that's another time-consuming thing. If you have money to pay for data collection, that's very helpful. If you have funds to purchase software or to go and get training. So the more that the university commits both time and resources to research, the more likely you are to have faculty who are publishing in those high-quality journals.
Okay. Yeah, I totally agree. Thank you. Next question is a short one. Could you share some tips for how to keep logic when we write?
To be logical?
Yeah, logical, I think. Yeah.
Gosh, It's, I think it's a skill to develop.
Scared to
And
develop.
the more you work on it, the more
Mhm.
you will get better at it. It's like anything else. If you are training for a sport, you will
Yeah.
get better at it because of your training. And it's the same with logic. Some
Mhm.
people are naturally better at that than others. But in my experience, most people can develop that skill.
Mhm. So
And you,
for yeah, in your case, especially when you were a doctoral student, your supervisor or faculties told you that the logic is not clear, right?
that's
So
right.
then, so you write again and again and again, and you show someone's to your paper, right? A lot.
Yes. But I also took a seminar that was
A seminar.
focused on writing scientific papers.
I see.
And in the seminar, all the PhD students would try to write, we had the same paper to write, the same hypotheses. And
Mhm.
each week, first we all wrote an introduction, then we all wrote the methods, and then so we wrote the different sections of the paper and we shared each other's write-ups. And then the professor told us, what was good and what was bad. And
Oh,
after I took that seminar, my sense of how to develop the logic really improved a
wow, I see.
great deal.
I see. Wow, thank you. So next question is, can you please elaborate on the Australian journalist? So I think we have mentioned about the deciding high quality journal. Or,
Yeah, that's one that's very popular. Are you
yeah.
familiar with that one?
Yes, we also mentioned about that, and
Yeah.
we deferred it. Yeah, I forgot the name. Yeah.
It's the, what is the name of it? Well, you know what it is, so that's,
Yes, or
there's,
other.
yeah, I think that one is pretty good.
Mm,
It's pretty broad. So
mm,
depending on what your school is hoping for, it gives
mm.
you more options than some of the journal lists that are out there.
Uh, uh, my colleague sent me the housing list.
Yeah, there's the
Housing list.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
So.
that's popular internationally.
Yeah.
And so I think it includes a really broad array of journals, which is great.
Mm. Okay. Thank you. So next one is that should I withdraw my manuscript from a journal showing under review of my paper over 5 months, or any suggestions?
That's a tough one.
5 months, wow.
Yeah. The trouble is, if you withdraw, maybe the next journal will also be very slow. I think
Yeah.
in that case, if the journal has a policy of trying to review the papers in 2 to 3 months, then I would reach out to the editor. But if the journal doesn't have a stated policy, then you kind of have to expect that maybe it will be a long review time.
I
I mean,
see.
some journals, they take a year to
Yeah.
review. But a lot of the high quality journals are shorter. 5 months seems fairly long, but not terrible.
I
Okay.
see.
But certainly, if the journal has a reputation or a stated intention to review things within a couple or 3 months, I would just reach out to the editor and find out what's going on.
I see. Okay, thank you. So next question is that thank you for such encouraging, inspiring, and informative talk. I have a simple question. What is your advice on how to manage our time and courage working inclusively with our co-authors on research topic? You have shared with us the recognition of your recent works that took 8 years.
Yeah.
So yeah, how to manage our time.
Yeah. I think that in that case, we didn't think it would take us that long, but we were willing to invest that because, it was a new field and we wanted to make sure that we got it right, essentially.
Yeah.
But it took a couple of years longer than we anticipated.
Mm.
So, but as an assistant professor or a doctoral student,
Mhm.
I wouldn't take on a project like that one
I
because you
see.
don't have as much time. You have
Yeah.
to prove yourself very quickly. And during that time period, when we were working on that paper, I published other papers.
Mm.
So one of the things I would recommend is always to have papers in different stages of completion,
Mm.
right? So maybe you have a brand new project and then another one that you've collected some data and another one that's just about ready for review. So, you have that pipeline of papers so that maybe you can make the time to invest in a big project like that one, right?
Mm. Yeah.
And but you also have these other projects that can be published more quickly.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I see. Yeah, thank you. So next question is that a thorough literature review is important to publish in high quality journals. However, some universities do not have access to journals because of the high cost. What is your advice to researchers stuck in this situation?
Oh, that is so tough.
Yeah.
It is so tough. I would say one of the things you can do, and I have found this, that I have scholars from parts of the world where they don't have access to journals, email me directly and ask me for copies of my papers.
I see.
So that's one thing you can do. If you have a co-author who has a better library than yours, maybe they can do the lit search and help you there. But if your university doesn't create access to journals, that is very tough.
Yeah.
That's a tough situation.
Yeah, so finding or first solution is to sending the email to the authors, right, directory, and also find the co-authors who can have more better access.
The other thing I like to do, this is more recent. I'll go to Google Scholar.
Yeah.
So for example, maybe I want to find out who's citing my papers because I think, well, maybe there's new papers on my topic that I would like to read. And oftentimes people post those, the PDFs, or if you go to ResearchGate, it's posted for free. So those can be really good resources as well, as long as you have a sense of the topic and the scholars. I mean, there's free resources out there.
Yeah, I agree. Thank you for your tips. So next question is that there are many new ideas and new academic articles every day. So when we have a new idea, we think maybe it is new, but others may say it is not new and novel. How to define it is a new idea and it is feasible to make it academic?
Oh,
Yeah.
gosh, that's kind of a tough situation. That's why I recommend trying to read all relevant literature. Because if you haven't, you might miss something that makes your idea that you've worked so hard at not as new as you thought it was. So I think being aware of what's been published on a topic, and sometimes I think the hardest thing, and I found this as a doctoral student early on, people call the same thing different labels. They have different labels for the same exact concept. So you might miss some of the important articles. But I think that the other thing you can do to sort of test out the newness is talk to other scholars who may know more about the subject than you do, or may be familiar with ideas in the domain that you're interested in. But the more that you're part of the community of scholars, people who are doing research, even if it's a broad domain, you can ask people, have you seen anything on this topic? And usually if they're people who, are working in the field and have put in a lot of time, they can tell you. You ask a few more seasoned scholars, they can probably tell you, oh yeah, that's been done before, or wow, that's new. Tell me more.
Yeah. It's true. Okay. Just quick question. When you read, you mentioned that read a lot of articles about the concept it's related to your new idea. It means that you read whole articles or just read some, for example, abstract or some part of the articles.
Well, I usually start out with the abstract to try to figure out how relevant is it.
Okay.
When I'm writing my papers, usually if it has some relevance, I'll read it just to make sure. Because what I've discovered is that oftentimes the abstract doesn't give you the full picture of what's in the article. So it can be a shortcut early on, but I would say when you're really sitting down to write, you probably should read the articles that have some relevance.
I see. Thank you. So next question is, thank you very much for your inspiring presentation. As an early career faculty, I would appreciate it if you could share with me or us some tips for managing different tasks and balancing them. For example, research project together with teaching, administrative tasks, and private life, etc. So how to balance these kind of tasks?
Yeah, that can be really hard. I think that for me, the blocks of time is what works for me. So if I'm working on my course, I like to just totally focus on that while I'm working on it and not think about anything else. And it's the same with research or with a service activity. Sometimes service activities are, pretty easy and you can put them down and pick them up again. But teaching and scholarship require real focus. And I just get more done if I focus. I'm good at that though. I can, I shut the doors, block out all the noise and, focus. Just really focus. You get 10 times more done if you don't allow yourself to look at email and so on when you're working on something. So I think it's just blocks of time and using your time efficiently. I think also knowing when you're at your best. So for example, for scholarship, I find my mornings are best. When I work on papers in the morning, my mind is so sharp. I can work on teaching anytime or service, but scholarship, because it's more challenging and more puzzling, I find the mornings are my best time.
I see.
So understanding where where you could do activities best for you.
And at the time you only focus on it, right?
Just that. Yeah.
I see. Thank you. And next question is, sometimes or often you may work multi-research projects, which are different topics and fields. Do you have any tips to manage these researches when you are all corresponding author researchers? Personally, I have struggled to remember what I was doing. I spent a couple of hours to read my draft and time's up to back to university service tasks. So never progress. So how to deal with multi-research project in your case?
Yeah. I find that I really have to focus on usually, one project at a time, but it depends on the project. So for example, if I'm working on the conceptual part of a paper, that requires the most focus. But I could be working on data analysis or methods or results, and I don't have to focus quite so carefully as I do on the conceptual part. So I think you have to kind of judge where you need blocks of time and where you don't need quite as much focus and you can put it down and pick it up again. And I think it just depends on you and your style and what works for you. But I think you have to pay attention to what's good for you and try to stick with that so that you can get the things done that you want to get done.
I see. Thank you. So next one is last question. The person who asked you to send the Australian journalist link. So thank you to all who sent the Australian journalist link. So this is a question perhaps also for the floor for researchers in Japan. What are some examples of journals in Japan you would consider to be high quality? Oh, it's all related to the Japanese question, but what are some examples of journals in Japan you would consider to be a high quality journal? So unfortunately, Japanese journal is not popular in US, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and also, so I think that I should answer this question, but because they ask about the high quality or example journals in Japan which is recognized as high quality journals. So I think that this depends on the field, right? And if you need this question answer of this question, please let me know. I can help you to answer this question. So I'll send my address to you. So please send me email if you want to know or discuss about this question. So thank you, Professor Schwartz. There are a lot of questions, but you have sincerely answered of them. So any additional questions, or we have also some CIL members in today. So Professor Alcantara or Professor Peter, do you have any questions for the first session?
Thank you for asking, Professor Shinohara. I'll leave my questions to the second session because I think now our time is out for this session, I believe, so we can move to the next session. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Same here.
Okay, so if we don't have any questions, so let's end this first session. So thank you so much, Professor Shore, to come and sharing your great experience and information. I really appreciate you. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
And everybody, thank you for joining this morning CR session. And I hope today's session will encourage you to do more research and research. Thank you.